Hey guys, welcome back to another reaction video. You guys gonna be checking out why is a Greek alphabet so special. Okay, so let's check this out.
Developed an alphabet that is still used by the Greeks today, but needless to say it's quite different to the Latin alphabet that most of us are probably more familiar with. So in this video I want to find out,
It's very
why
different
is
from
Greek
the Latin alphabet.
so different and yet so similar to the Latin alphabet. Well, to find out
Okay.
about the Greek alphabet that was developed by the ancient Greeks, we first have to find out about a different people, notably the Phoenicians. Now, the Phoenicians came from an area around modern-day Israel and Lebanon and Syria, that kind of area on the coast of the Middle East, and these peoples moved out and traded across the Mediterranean and founded many settlements, especially in the Western Mediterranean and in North Africa, which is, for example, where you get the city of Carthage from, which became one of the prominent opponents to the Romans during the Punic Wars. Now, they were notably merchants and traders, trading in many things, most famously their Phoenician dye, which was a deep purple colour. And they came into contact with different peoples, and this is how they spread their writing system, which they had. Now, the writing system they had was known as an abjad.
So you guys, he just actually, he just give a small brief, on how these alphabets were being created, okay, on how the alphabets, how they came about the alphabets, okay, from the ancient Greece, okay. So, but I'm still getting to, I'm still getting deeper of this, okay.
And an abjad is essentially an alphabet that is written where only the consonants are written. And so obviously you have vowels in their language too, otherwise it'd be a horrible language if there were no vowels in it. But obviously they would then infer the vowels from the consonants that are written. However, by this stage, the Phoenician language was what's known as an imperfect abjad, which is where, yes, they only made letters for the consonants, but when there was a vowel, they would put some little sign or some little note to put that there would be a vowel there. So that's the start of where you got vowels. So instead of having an A in the word abjad, for example, you might just have a little apostrophe or something like that. Now, this is what the Phoenician alphabet looked like. Some shapes are slightly familiar to the ones that we have. Most of them seem really quite different, and most of them, again, are, and there's my point again with the O is drawn with this little apostrophe, or that was the little symbol for an apostrophe, which they would put for such a vowel, as well as the one in the top there. And most of these shapes are quite straight, angular shapes that you can draw fairly easily. And this was because the Phoenician language, when it came about, was being written on styluses, which is these little wax is bored into these wooden frames, and then you'd have these little wax booklets, and you would write with a stylus, so a big stick in that. And that's why the language looks very angular. Now, an even more angular language, fun fact, is obviously the runic alphabets of the Futharks. And the reason this is even more angular is because
the alphabets actually look quite different. So there's no similarity to its normal alphabet, that we are using generally. The alphabet looks quite different, and I love the way he's actually explaining it and a better understanding. This is beautiful.
This was carved into stones, so the famous rune stones, as well as into weapons. So you find it in some metal,
from the stones,
obviously of blades and things, as well as on wood, which is why they are very angular and very straight, because they would be written in with a knife, carved in with a knife. But that's a little extension. So another great trading and
it's written with a knife
were, of course, the Greeks, and these are just some of the colonies that the Greeks had across the Mediterranean, and they obviously interacted with the Phoenicians. And lo and behold, it's from the Phoenicians that the Greeks got the idea of the alphabet, of writing things down, because for trade, it's really quite a useful thing to have. So the ancient Greeks around...
from the Phoenicians, that was where the Greeks actually have the idea of writing things down, because when you're trading, it's actually very good for you to write things down. So this alphabet came about from the Phoenicians, you guys. And who are the Phoenicians? Please let me know in the comment section.
770, 750 BC. This is the time period we're talking that we find the first
ancient Greece
of the Greeks using the Phoenician alphabet. Again, we realize it's from the Phoenicians because the letter forms are incredibly similar, to write not in Phoenician anymore, but in Greek for the first time. And the first real artifact with a large inscription is known as Nestor's cup, which is from around 750 BC.
Next up,
and the inscription on there looks like this when it's drawn out properly. And again, you can see that the letter forms have evolved slightly from the ones I showed before, and they continue to evolve separately until at one point you get Greek being really a separate entity to the Phoenician alphabet that it had been. The 5th century BC ancient Greek historian Herodotus has a different story for how the Greeks came about the knowledge of the alphabet. He writes that the Phoenicians who came with Cadmus, amongst whom were the Gephiriae, introduced into Greece after their settlement in the country a number of accomplishments, of which the most important was writing, an art till then. I think unknown to the Greeks. At first they, the Phoenicians, used the same characters as all the other Phoenicians, but as time went on and they changed their language, they also changed the shape of their letters. At that period, most of the Greeks in the neighborhood were Ionians. They were taught these letters by the Phoenicians and adopted them, with a few alterations, for their own use, continuing to refer to them as the Phoenician characters, as was only right, as the Phoenicians had introduced them. He carries on to say, the Ionians also called paper skin.
Actually changed some of the alphabets, and you guys,
a survival from antiquity when paper was hard to get, and they did actually use goat and sheep skins to write on. That would be vellum. Indeed, even today, many foreign peoples use this material. So, for example,
they actually use goats and sheepskins to write on. That was when the paper was actually hard to get. So they have to make use of goats and sheep skins to write.
Or in the Anglo-Saxon and the later on when the Icelandic sagas are being written, that was what they were using. Those are the foreign peoples, although obviously that's
many people still use this. A lot of people still use this.
Apollo at Theba in Boeotia. I have myself seen cauldrons with inscriptions cut on them in Cadmean characters, most of them not very different from the Ionian. There are also other accounts by various other historians. Plutarch gets involved. There's one by Hyginus in which he says that the first vowels came from the Fates, who are essentially the ancient Greek version of the Norns from Old Norse mythology, who decide the fate of all things, at the start of the world, that kind of thing. The adoption of writing made things an awful lot easier for the ancient Greeks, and so it spread in a very short amount of time to many of their colonies. Now, one of these colonies was one of the Italian colonies in the region of Campania, and is called the city of Cumae. And in the city of Cumae, the alphabet is thought to have reached within about 20, maybe 25 years of its initial adoption by the Greeks from the Phoenicians in Euboea, which is the first city where it was adopted. Also, apologies for the awful Greek pronunciations throughout this video. And in the city of Cumae, it was adopted, and then later on, it had contact with the...
so you have to get to 18 years before you can be adopted or something, Wow.
The Italian or the Etruscan peoples further north, who then developed it for their own writing system very quickly, because obviously it was such a useful tool to have that they saw the use in it and started to write themselves, again, in this now already slightly changed Western form of the archaic Greek script. Now, an interesting thing is that this would then develop into an Etruscan script, but already there were some changes in this Western Greek from the Eastern Greek, so in what's now modern-day Greece. There were already some changes in the letter forms that were then transcribed over into the Etruscan forms, and that we still keep today, as you can see from this helpful little table here, which is really quite interesting. And also the Etruscan language over the centuries started to change as well. Now, it's thought that Etruscan, the first attested Etruscan artifact, is from around 700 BC. So this is only...
So this particular change started from the modern Greece, which we are in right now, okay, which is the modern Greece, and yeah.
It's less than a century after the Greeks had adopted the Phoenician alphabet, and then they'd taken it over to Cumae and their western settlements, and then very soon after that, it was taken over by the northern Italian peoples, the Etruscans, who spoke a non-Indo-European language, actually, very interestingly, and then used this alphabet to write their own language down. Now, of course, they came into conflict with the Romans, and after the Romans conquered them, and through contact with the Etruscans, and probably also the Greek city-states to the south, they then came into contact with this alphabet that was already rapidly becoming more and more like the one that we know today. And it's from them that obviously we get the Latin script, which is essentially what English is written in today as our...
So you guys, this is so hard for me to even understand very, very well, because the history trace around the Finnish, trace around the Italy, the writing, and then it's passed back to the Greece. And you guys, that's too much. That's too much. I think I'm not done with this yet. I'm going to revisit it because I really want to understand more. This is not just it's not just so clear to me, okay? I'm just going to revisit it, or I'll do another video of the reason why the Greek alphabet is so special, because, or I will go back and understand it well, because there's a whole lot that was said that I really took in, but I did not understand very well, okay? But it will be okay for you to please let me understand or summarize it on the comment section. And I love the fact that it actually comes with English subtitles, you guys. Thank you so much. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, share this video. I'll see you on my next one. Bye.